Hello and welcome to another edition of Lunch and Learn with Legacy Washington. Legacy is a history program in the Office of the Secretary of State, along with our colleagues in the State Archives and Library. I'm Bob Young, a historian with Legacy, and I'm thrilled today to talk to our guest, Trish Millines Dziko, the co-founder and longtime executive director of the Technology Access Foundation, or TAF as it's known. Welcome, Trish.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great to see you. And I just want to tell the audience that we wrote a biography of Trish for our book and exhibit in the state capitol about trailblazing Washington women called Ahead of the Curve. And let me brief you quickly about TAF. It is a nonprofit organization that aims to bring equity to public school education, particularly in the realm of science, technology, engineering, and math, or STEM as we know it. But TAF is celebrating its 25th anniversary, and it has come quite a ways from the days when Trish and her partner Jill Hull started it as an after-school program geared towards getting children of color and girls internships with technology companies.
Mm-hmm.
It now co-manages, I should say, 2 public schools, partners with 5 others, and has trained hundreds of educators. TAF students have an on-time high school graduation rate of 95%, and that's in serving more than 20,000 students. Trish has been at the helm of TAF, and her own story is amazing and inspiring to me, although she's pretty humble about it. She was raised by a single mother, a remarkable woman. She won a basketball scholarship to college. And then she became a rare breed, an African-American woman accomplished in computer science. She went from programming to prominence in that largely white male world of technology in the Seattle area. Then she walked away from serious money at Microsoft to create TAF, saying, "You share what you have." Trish, can you tell us about where you grew up?
So I grew up in Belmar, New Jersey.
And where's Belmar?
That's a small town on the shore. And it's, it was about 2,500 people between Belmar and South Belmar. So I lived in South Belmar. It's a segregated town. And in the summertime, it would like double, sometimes triple in population because the beaches were very popular. And it's just a little bit south of Asbury Park, which a lot of people know because of Bruce Springsteen. He made Asbury Park famous, which is cool. But all my cousins and my aunts and uncles, like we all lived in the same town. My mom adopted me as an older woman, and gave me an amazing life for the 17 years of my life that she was alive.
And tell us a little bit more about your mom. She was born herself in Georgia, and the family migrated north. And what did she do for a living? And kind of how did she influence you with her work habits?
Yeah, she was born in Eatonton, Georgia, as were her 3 siblings. They moved to Florida, then New Jersey, and she cleaned houses for a living. So none of them graduated or even finished elementary school. They were one step away from enslaved people. She worked for some pretty nice, really nice people. I mean, she could have worked for people that treated her cruelly, but she didn't. But one of the coolest things about her is she worked for the Warner Brothers. This was before she adopted me. She lived in New York, and she worked for the Warner Brothers at the Pierre Hotel. And they lived there because back then hotels had those suites, that rich people lived in. And they gave her money every day to take the cab home, and she saved that money and took the bus. And she took that money and bought a house in Belmar. So that's how she got the first house. And then right next door, so she had tenants living there. So it was me and her and like 4 or 5 other people who rented out rooms from her. she made enough money to build us our own little bungalow on the same lot next door. So she was an enterprising woman, and probably would have never gotten recognized for it in today's world, but she did some amazing stuff.
Right, and for our audience, the Warner Brothers that Trish refers to were the heads of one of Hollywood's most famous movie studios, and a couple of the brothers remained in New York because of its importance in the business world. And I just have to say, because I know Trish wouldn't, but so she alluded to them in the Pierre Hotel. Fast forward decades, and Trish receives the Arthur Ashe Leadership Award at the Pierre Hotel, kind of coming full circle, which is amazing. And your mom had a vision for you, if you will, and the number one priority, as I understand it, was
college. And
as a teen, as a young teen, you resisted that idea at one time. And what happened after that?
Well, so that summer, so I was 13. That summer, I ended up working with my mom all summer, cleaning houses. And then the summer was extra busy because she took on extra clients who came down and had summer houses. So we worked weekdays and weekends, and that quickly changed my mind about the whole college. I don't even know what I was thinking, because I always wanted to be like a doctor, and but I was at that rebellious age and thinking, well, I'm not going to go to college. But so she had a way like that, She was also an entrepreneur in a different way. She started 3 churches in my lifetime. And I watched her, raise money and build a congregation. In one case, they built a whole church from the ground up. That was the second church. And then find a pastor and still maintain all the stuff that churches do, like the fish fries and the barbecues and all that, to raise money to help people. And that was the environment that me and my cousins grew up in.
And then you went to Asbury Park High School, where you were an accomplished athlete, basketball player. You led the team to a state championship in your senior year. You were the point guard. You were the high scorer in the championship game.
Which in and of itself is very odd, because I was not the scoring person on the team. I always had a lot of assists. I never had a lot of points. So I don't know what it was, but I went back and read the article you found, because I hadn't looked at that stuff for a while. I looked at it, I was like, really? And my son goes, hey, you were the high scorer. I said, I don't even remember that, right? I remember we won. That was the thing.
And I remember the Converse high tops that you were wearing then.
Oh yeah, those.
And I remember you told me about you used to play with the guys on the playgrounds. I mean, this was long before the days of the WNBA. And I'm guessing there weren't many female basketball role models, but I have to mention that you had a spin move that you got from the immortal Earl the Pearl.
That move is like it is the simplest, most deadly move that you can make. And as a point guard, I would come down, and then if I saw an opening, I would go to the top of the key, I'd make a spin, and it'd either go right to the hoop or pass to Betty McGuire. She was my favorite. I'd pass to her because she can always hit it, or I pull up for what was would have been a 3 in today's game. It was still a 2-point shot at that time. So
all right, last basketball question for now. I have to ask you, who's your favorite current player?
I think on the men's side, Steph Curry for sure. On the women's side, it's still Teresa Edwards, and she isn't playing anymore, but she played in the Olympics starting at the age of 16, and she was a point guard. And Dawn Staley followed after her, then Sue Bird followed after her. So we have this history in this country of nurturing those point guards on the women's side to make sure they go in. I think Teresa was in 4 different Olympics. I mean, that's a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was good on all of them. Yeah.
And I can't help but note that today you're still operating like the point guard in many ways at TAF.
Mhm.
But tell me, so your senior year, you have the triumph of a state championship, but then there's also some tragedy.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about what happened in that senior year?
Yeah, so my senior year, my mom was diagnosed with cancer of the pancreas and liver. And, we didn't have any real health insurance back then, but she was on some kind of assistance. I'm not sure what it was, but she got really, really sick. And when it was the day before Mother's Day that year, she passed away. It was just really, it was the day after Mother's Day. It was a Monday. I remember that. She passed away and it was hard. It was really hard. It was like my whole world crushing, but I also have to be ready for college. Like there's no way I could not go to college, although I had those moments of I need to stay here and kind of figure out what to do next. And,
Mm.
because she was my entire world. I had a lot of family, obviously, but adults and stuff. But it's like, okay, here I am by myself. And I was right at that age. I hadn't turned 18 yet. So I was right at that age where I technically should have gone into foster care. Because she died in May and I wasn't going to be 18 until July. So I'm thankful that my family protected me from that.
And then your mother, being as thrifty and entrepreneurial as she had a small estate, as I understand it. And how did she encourage your independence even in her passing?
I couldn't have any money that came from it until I was 35. And just wanting to make sure that I made my own way. I did the things that I was supposed to do. So it was interesting because between her and my basketball coach in college, they both pushed me in that way because Joan Martin was my coach and I wanted to go into the Air Force when I graduated college because I wanted to work on airplanes and I wanted to still play basketball. And she just basically said, you've been taken care of all your life. You need to get out there and make sure you can, survive on your own without all of these people around you. So I've had that, I've had people that have pushed me out there. What they didn't know is that there was nobody out there to catch me. Right? There was nobody there that was giving me internships or any of that stuff while I was in college. I didn't have many mentors when I got my first jobs, so that while they were trying to get me to be independent, they didn't know that world. And that's, but, here I am. I had them as role models. I had my aunts and uncles and, everybody who made a way, they found a way or they made a way as my example of how you make it.
And I believe Joan said, your coach, Joan Martin, once said that you arrived at Monmouth College, now university, as more of an athlete, but left as more of a student. And where did your interest in technology come from, do you think?
I didn't have an interest in technology. I had an interest in engineering. And that's where my major was electrical engineering. I like taking things apart, putting them back together. Many moments my mother wished I didn't like to do that because sometimes I get stuff back together. But so the challenge for me was that the labs for my EE major were at the same time as my basketball practices. I went to school on a scholarship and there's no other way to afford school. So I had to make that choice. And I had good advice from people and they said computer science is probably better. And I took my first Fortran class. I loved it. And I just knew right there that was it. And we did do some hardware stuff. We used logic models and logic trainers and things like that. So I did get a chance to do like some hands-on stuff, but it worked out.
And then what was your first job in that field?
My first job was at Computer Sciences Corporation down in Morristown, New Jersey. I wrote software to test a 4-phase radar system which was a big deal back then because it was a radar that was actually a block that sat on top of a ship. And it sampled on all sides of the block instead of the old radar that used to turn, right? This just sat still. And so I wrote software in a language called, I think it was like CMQ and Y, which is basically a version of Fortran. So it was easy for me to pick it up. And, you know, a lot of those old military systems today are still working on like Fortran and COBOL and those legacy type languages. Yeah.
And then you go out to Arizona to work for the Hughes company. And that's the same one that was known for building aircraft. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I worked in the division that made missiles. And I wrote software to test the Phoenix missile, which is a very long, like, I don't know, 40-foot missile. And I would sit, I wrote this software that I would run and I would sit next to a section of the missile. And then that's where I would run the test. And I also wrote tests for the Maverick missile, the TOW missile, sorry, that sat up on your shoulder.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And, you know, after a while, it's just like, I didn't want to do that anymore. So I moved over to the business side, where I supported the word processing team by creating an app to help them have better workflow.
And what was it like then, being a woman and an African-American woman in that field?
Lonely, very lonely, you know. And I think it's not really that much different now. I mean, there's, you know, certainly more. But it was, you know, having my first two jobs being military contracted companies really added an extra layer because you had retired military, mostly white guys. So they were getting their pension, plus they were getting paid to work in these companies. And they weren't used to being around people of color. And in fact, when I was at Hughes, my first boss, or he was my supervisor, and then if there was ever a stereotypical racist military guy, he was it. And he did not like me. He didn't like me being there. Fortunately, his boss gave me some protection. And then I ended up changing groups to get away from that.
And you persevered. You didn't walk away from it despite those obstacles. Why do you think that? Why do you think that was?
There's no other way. Like, you just don't give up. Right? You find a way, or still go back to find a way or make a way. Right? When it was a field that I loved, right? I loved the programming, didn't love the missiles, but it's a field that I love. I had made some friends there. I wanted to stay there. And I just found success in a different department.
And one thing I didn't know until I was researching your story is that once upon a time, women in programming were not unusual. If we go quite a ways back, they were the men wanted to be involved in the engineering, the hardware of the massive computers like ENIAC, and women were seen as better suited to the precise and repetitious nature of programming. I read that it was even thought of as kind of knitting with math. But then something changed in the early 80s in the pipeline, if you will, because in the academic year of 83, 84, 37% of the degrees in computer science and information science went to women. In a short time, that number would be cut in half. There was the beginning of the development of a stereotype of the computer jockey as a white male nerd. And that started to turn off women, hardcore nerd, if you will. And excuse me, and that started to really affect then the pipeline, which becomes really, I'm getting ahead of myself, but it becomes really important to your creating TAF. But before then, you move up to San Francisco for a while, and then you take, now that you're on the West Coast, you take a trip to Seattle, and what happens then?
So I worked for a small company called Telecalc, and I was hired as a test manager because I'm in this field now of writing software to test hardware and test other software. So, and that was a new field. And I had a lot of experience doing that. They hired me as a manager. I had a small team. I worked there for a couple of years, and then it looked like the company wasn't going to make it after like this big boom of hiring and all this, right? And I had to start laying off people. So I knew I was going to be next. So I ended up leaving. I had a small little contracting company and ended up having Microsoft as a client. And I worked in the SQL Server group there, writing tests. I knew more about testing than anybody there. So writing software to test more software. And it was a different environment though, because it was really the first time I worked on a server environment, right? Everything else I had done on the desktop. And this time I'm testing something that's on a machine, down the hall, or, sitting on the floor here while I'm working on another one. So it was a good way to stretch myself, I think.
And these were the relatively early days of Microsoft.
Yeah, this was in 88.
Mm-hmm.
And I moved to Seattle in 85, so I hadn't been here long.
Mm-hmm. And even though you're an East Coast person, which means, you have a little bit of an edge. You adapted to Seattle. How and tell us why you wanted to make Seattle a home.
Look, I just liked it here. It was I had some friends that lived here. This is why I came up to visit in Thanksgiving '84, and really loved it here. And people seemed like they stayed here. And the reason why I wanted to leave San Francisco is because people didn't stay there long, right? So I liked being here. I moved up here January 10th, 1985. I found a rugby team. I found a soccer team. I found friends. It was really a great environment to stay. And then I had a great job at Microsoft, like, no need to leave. And then eventually, met Jill and we started a family here.
So that the Seattle freeze didn't actually have a chilling effect on you.
No, I'm pretty open with people. It's just like, don't even bother if you're not going to show up, right? But and I do find the passive aggressiveness of Seattle is still annoying. But I just get by it by being frank and open and encourage other people to be as well.
Cool. And what were the challenge? What kind of challenges did you kind of hit or run into at Microsoft in that aggressive culture?
Yeah, it's a weird thing. Like, they had this whole profile of what a programmer is, and then a profile of what a program manager is. And I was a program manager, and it was that you got to be tough, the pounding your hands on the desk kind of person. To really run a group, because none of those people reported to you, right? So you had a product, but the developers, the testers, the user education people, the marketing, the support, none of those people reported to you, but they all worked on your project, right? And so I think they believe you had to be tough to make everybody work together. And so there were some really good people that didn't get jobs there who I thought would have been great program managers. We also, like every other company, had a diversity issue. And they were growing fast. They were the fastest growing company out of all the tech companies. And just hiring people and not paying attention to who they were hiring in terms of race and gender and places in the country. Like, every way you can think, they just had this profile that you went to school at these top 10 universities, and that's where they were going to draw from.
And then after you're doing work on a lot of work on the tech side, and including on things like the Easy Ball Kids Mouse and other
That was
things.
my favorite. Oh my God, that was my favorite.
It's funny how these all tie together.
Yeah.
But and other things I'm not conversant in, you decided to try and do something about that diversity issue, and you were a founder of BAM, Blacks at Microsoft, and then you took this leap into the diversity work
Yeah.
at Microsoft. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so BAM was started by a group of us, not by me only. A group of us who were coming from different places. This is in 1989. And the biggest issue coming to the Pacific Northwest is it's just all white, right? And where do you go to church? Where do you get your hair cut? Where do you go out, to clubs and that kind of stuff? We're all young. We have social lives. We want to keep up a social life. So that's kind of how it started. And then all of us volunteered at some point during the year, every year, to go out and recruit more people of color. We go to the historically Black colleges, or if any large colleges had a minority, job fair or recruitment fair, we would go. So eventually I just got to a point where I'm just like, I think that I can do better if I'm actually in the diversity department. And at that time it was new and it was mostly focused on compliance, making sure, because Microsoft had government contracts, so they had to make sure they met certain numbers and all that. So when I came in, it completely changed how the department operated. I focused on the pipeline. I also focused on retention, because that was the big problem. You're in an environment that's not built for you, they're not ready for you, and they don't care to change. So how do you keep people there? So I did that for a year and a half, almost 2 years before leaving.
And then, if I could say this, you had kind of an epiphany about that pipeline, about how those colleges, many of the schools that Microsoft would look to, didn't have a robust recruitment or population of students of color and female students. So tell us how there was a fateful walk with Jill and what that led to.
Yeah, so that walk actually was followed by, was behind a visit that Jill made to TAF, or to Microsoft. So she worked at Seattle Mental Health, and her clients were kids who were in the behavior disorder classrooms in Seattle public schools. And they were middle school kids, and they were mostly all Black males. And she would go into these classrooms and to do her observations and stuff and to work with them. And the teacher would be sitting there with their feet on their desk reading the newspaper. So nobody's educating these kids. So she brought a group of them over to Microsoft one summer, and because I was running the high school internship program. So on the shuttle over to where my high school interns were, her kids were loud, and they were, pointing out all kinds of stuff. And then we get them in the conference room where I had 5 of my interns testing that Cassiopeia, which was the precursor to what we have as, cell phones, part of our cell phones. And you can hear a pin drop. They saddled up next to my interns, because these people, these interns weren't more than 2-3 years older than them. So they're seeing kids who look like them doing this kind of stuff. And on the way back to my office on the shuttle, the kids are talking about, I want to be an engineer. I want, so that was like a light bulb moment for both of us, but particularly for her, because she had not been around that type of atmosphere before, right, in tech. She's a social worker. So we were walking our dogs around Green Lake that next January and talking about, what if we started a nonprofit to train kids and get them the skills they need so that they can work in tech. And, for her to make that kind of, yeah, that's a good idea leap was a lot, because she had just gotten her master's. She had only been working like 3-4 years after getting her master's. And I'm asking her to completely leave her passion, to do this. But she saw that tie to education, right, which was also important to her too.
Mm.
So we made the decision, and then I gave 4 months notice because I wanted to see my last group of interns come through. And then in August of 1996, I left.
And I just have to tell our audience who may not know, at this time, Microsoft was granting employees stock options.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a really sweet deal because you could get them at one value, and well, I don't know if I could explain it right. But anyway, it was very lucrative for the people, the stock options. And so Trish walked away from adding many zeros to her bank account in order to start TAF. And it began as a after-school internship program, as I think I mentioned. So the idea was to get kids internships and give them college scholarships, if you will. But in not very long, you had more students interested than you could admit. So then the idea changes a little bit to what, Trish?
Well, sort of a combination of having more kids than we could admit, and also our students who were going to college, and they all were, many of them could not major in computer science or engineering right away because they had to take remedial math. They were not getting the math training that they were supposed to get in high school, middle school and high school. And I'm looking at these kids and we're all saying, look, they're programming. They're managing networks, like they're doing this every summer, and you're telling me that they can't take your computer science class. So we started thinking about what if we were a major part of their education, starting from middle school? What if we were their education and we could find a public school that would partner with us to create a completely different model so that all these kids would be ready? So you have that, plus because we would be their school, we can get more kids, right? Already, even though we were successful, the kids who can come to us after school are who we taught. And if we were their whole school, it's like we're part of their life right away. So we spent a year trying to figure out, because none of us were educators, we spent a year trying to figure out what is it we really want to achieve, and who are the educators out there who can help us. And so we met with college folks, with high school folks, middle school, people from the superintendent of public instruction, and we assembled an advisory team to help us build what is now called our STEM by TAF model. And then we had to package this thing and try to get a district to buy into it.
And the first attempt was at Rainier Beach High School in Seattle, where, as I recall, those standardized test math numbers were dreadfully low. But there you ran into a lot of district politics that you were not really, weren't really part of, but
nor were we prepared for it.
But they existed. So. And some parents, because of the history there, were suspicious of you and what your objectives were. By the way, Carla Santorno was then the chief academic officer for Seattle School District. She went on to become Tacoma school superintendent. But in talking to her, she said that there was no problem with the TAF model. It just ran into a district that at the time wasn't ready for it. But a superintendent in Federal Way, Tom Murphy, had heard about TAF and was impressed. So what happens next?
So Tom and I met. We served on a board together, and he was following this whole thing through the papers. And when he realized it was like, okay, it looks like Seattle is done, he asked if he can meet with me. And so I sat down with him for about an hour and a half and walked him through the whole model. And when we were done, he said, "You belong in Federal Way." And, we had kids from Federal Way, so it wasn't like Federal Way was an unknown. But then the interesting part is I immediately went into that. This is how I need to deal with the school district mode. And he, basically said, "Hold on, I got this." And so I got a chance to see what real leadership at the district level looked like, right?
Oh.
So he got the board together. He had me present in front of the board. And then that included the teachers union, right? President. And we had to go through the whole process that they already had set up for if you want to bring in a new school or a new model, even if you're an internal employee, it doesn't matter. They all go through the same process. We went through that process. It was so much easier, so much easier. When you have a structure and people who are willing to try new things, you can get some stuff done. So we went through this process, and then we signed an agreement in November 2007 to open the school in September 2008. That included them clearing, they had no building for us. That included them clearing out land to put portables up. That included us going out and recruiting students from the neighborhood to let them know that this was an option. The district helped us along the way. They helped us find, we had to work together to get a principal, like all this stuff we did together. And we had regular meetings. And on September 2008, we welcomed our first students to TAF Academy. See, I have my little TAF Academy.
All
Sure.
right.
Yeah, TAF Academy Tigers. So, and the school grew. We started with 6th, 7th, and 9th, which I will never do again. I would only start with middle school. And then added a grade, and then 2012 was our first graduating class.
And then you expand on that. How exactly?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that happened. By 2012, 2013, charter schools were being voted in. And we had planned on opening 5 schools. And we couldn't find money. Our second school was going to be in Renton, and Mary Alice Huschel had everybody on board. The school board was ready to go, but we couldn't get funding because all the money was going to charters. So here we are with this model. What do we do with it? We started by offering a summer institute for teachers so that they can learn to teach the way we teach. And then from there, one of the schools, Mountview Elementary, was like, we want our whole school to be like this. And knowing that we couldn't get the money to actually, start from scratch with them, we said, well, let's think about what a transformation model would look like. Can we take our model and put it in an existing school with existing teachers and students and help them move toward what we have at TAF Academy? So the school transformation program was born, and that's how where we're at right now. We have 5 schools in that program. They're all elementary schools. And then we have our second academy now at Washington Middle School in Seattle, of all places. But before that happened, we expanded TAF Academy in Federal Way because we ran out of space and we had a long wait list. We combined with Sahalee Middle School and we became TAF at Sahalee. So now we have 600 and some odd students in a TAF school.
And that's 6 to 12.
That's
Correct.
6th through 12th grade.
Right.
And Washington Middle School is just middle school.
And I got to visit TAF Sahalee, and really just impressed me all the college acceptance, letters on the wall. And I went into a biology class, and it was cool because the students had posters of famous scientists on the wall, and rather than just kind of the usual suspects like Einstein, there was Neil deGrasse Tyson, the Puerto Rican and African American astrophysicist, and there was Shirley Ann Jackson, the first Black woman to get a doctorate at MIT, and then she went on to head the Nuclear Regulatory Commission and won the National Medal of Science. So that was cool, and there was just a practical aspect to the education I saw. So can you tell us, Trish, like how TAF differs from charter schools?
Yeah, so we are, the schools belong to the district. We are just a partner. And so our co-managed schools, we provide, the idea was that we each bring our strengths to run this school. And the strengths of the districts are usually around managing and operating schools, doing all the reporting to the state, hiring and all those kind of mechanics, right? What we brought to the table was changing the actual environment, right? And so the difference between us and a charter school is we don't run the school. A charter school, you run the school, you bear all of the responsibility for the operations, the reporting, the state testing, like all that stuff. So you're investing another $1 million or so, at least, in that. For us, our donors are investing in the actual program of what happens in school, right? So everything goes directly to educating the kids. And that's a big advantage for us because we can partner with more schools instead of having to raise money for operations. We follow all the same rules as every other public school in terms of taking state tests, in terms of safety, all those things. What our job is to create an environment where kids feel like they are in control of their own learning, right? Where they feel they see themselves. That's why you saw those people of color, scientists of color on the wall, and you see them in every classroom all around, where kids can feel like this is my place and there are people who have been successful before me and I have a chance to do that. Our teachers collaborate every day. They collaborate in teams to make sure that they're taking care of their set of kids and doing the things that they're supposed to do for each individual kid, contacting the families, et cetera. It's just a different way of teaching in a way that respects students, respects families, respects teachers in their craft, and helps them continue to develop their craft.
And can you give us an example of the project-based learning emphasis?
Yeah, so project-based learning is done in a lot of places. The way we do it is in an interdisciplinary way. So for instance, you might get, so you have one math, one science, one humanities teacher that's working together on a project. It might center on, say, the environment. And because the environment is something that 6th graders and 7th graders have to learn about. So what they do is they look at their students and they think about what would they be interested in. And so they give the kids opportunity to talk about the kind of projects they might want to work on. So one example is in 7th grade, they talked about immigration. And one of the things that they're interested in, because a lot of kids are immigrants or they have friends who are immigrants, is the history of immigration and the currency of immigration and all the systems that are put in place. So there's science behind that, right? There is math behind that. There's humanities behind that. And those teachers craft these projects so that the kids have practical application of the subject itself. And then they present to a wider audience at the exhibition of learning. And the students do 3 to 4 projects every year. So they're in front of other people talking about their work. They're in front of their parents talking about their work. And it's really clear that they understand their work because they've been doing it for weeks at a time. Right? And that there's that, they're getting those compulsory skills as well. And how do I take these compulsory skills and apply it to something that makes sense?
And they're getting those skills, that array of skills, from a project that was interesting to them in the first place.
Yes, yes,
Not just standardized lessons being
correct,
pushed at them
correct.
as well. What have been the challenges? Well, let me just ask this first, Trish. So you don't go into just any school to partner, right? There are
No.
certain criteria
Mhm.
that you're looking at. Can you tell us about those criteria?
Yeah, so the first is that the superintendent has to have a vision for their district. The second is that the school board has to buy into the partnership as well. And then we have criteria for the types of schools we're looking for in terms of population, academics, racial makeup, free and reduced lunch, like all
Right.
those things. And then the most important person at that point, once we find a school or a set of schools, is the principal. And the principal has to be willing to understand this model and support their teachers through the model. And then the teachers, we require 80% of them to vote yes, that they want to do this,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then once we're there, it's about training and all that and getting them on board, us understanding their students, them understanding their students, because a lot of them, sometimes they don't even know their own students. So they, part of them saying, yes, I want to do this, is they're agreeing, they're making the effort to understand their students and their families, because you can't do these projects like this unless you know who they are, right?
Mm.
You got to know how they learn. You have to know their interests, where their challenges are, and all of that. So, and then it's a cycle. It's a 5-year cycle of training. We put a instructional coach full time on site, and they're there every day, and they're supporting the teachers, and they're helping them through this model. And then the rest of our staff, we chip in every school wherever we're needed.
So, pandemic challenges. I mean,
Oh,
it's got to be, it's hard on everybody, and I haven't talked to you about this yet.
yeah. Let me tell you, the pandemic was one thing. Coming back from it is a whole nother thing, right? So the big challenge for us when the pandemic came was, how do we take this high touch model,
Mm.
this relationship model, and make it virtual? So our coaches, our instructional coaches, our program managers, like everybody hunkered down to redo our entire model delivery. And once we got that going, we were, it wasn't too bad. Even though the kids could not be in the same room with each other, we had, Zoom rooms and team rooms and whatever platform they were using, they can still gather and still do their work. And we had pickup stops where the parents can come pick up materials if they needed to, or we would mail them to their house, like whatever it took to get it to them, so that they had the tools they needed to do the job. The biggest challenge right now, I'm going to tell you, is that these kids have not been in school for 2 years, essentially, right? And they haven't been social for that long. And now we're asking them to come back to school as if poof, nothing happened. All you have to do is wear a mask. And they're coming back very challenged in terms of socially. It's, some kids have anxiety about being in school.
Mm.
Some kids are, we got big 8th graders who are acting like 5th graders because they haven't been in school for a while. It's hard for them to sit still for, even 10 minutes. And we're active classrooms, right? But you have to sit still at some point to get instruction about what you're supposed to do. They're used to being on a screen, right? And having their phones in their hands, or on another app going while class is happening. And we forget that kids can pick these habits up very quickly. And
Mm-hmm.
so how do we break them of those habits? How do we get them back to being a community again? How do we get them back to wanting to learn again? In some ways, in different ways, but at least paying attention, right? The other part that's hard is they can't wander the school. So we used to let kids pre-pandemic, we would let kids sit out in the hall to work on their stuff, on their project. Well, they couldn't do that. So now you're crammed in a classroom all day. And then when you change classes, you're not allowed to stop and talk really, because we don't want you spreading it, so all this stuff we're asking them to get used to, and then have nerve to ask them to learn at the same time. So we're basically saying, let's figure out how do we spent the first couple of months getting them to be a community, getting them to understand that, it's not okay to say these things. Yeah, you said them online, but now you're face to face. Now you got to deal with it, right? So those kind of things, and really getting them back to the kind of learning community they were before they left.
Mm. And since, TAF has always, of course, embraced technology,
Mhm.
I wanted to ask you why the pluses of technology outweigh the negatives, do you think, for young people? The isolation, the kind of attention deficit, the low self-esteem, well, that comes with all the body shaming on social media and the like.
Technology has its pluses. When I think about all last year, we heard very little complaints from parents, not just at our schools, just like nationwide. Parents of color saying their kids are feeling more relaxed because they don't have to deal with the microaggressions every day, right?
Oh.
And then other kids who may have appeared different in some way are feeling more relaxed because they don't have to deal with the microaggressions. So there's that. But we're talking about real life, right? So kids have to learn how to socialize through that, and kids have to stop. We have to help kids stop body shaming and stop messing with people of color and acting like they're better than everybody else. That's what our job is. It's not to isolate everybody so that doesn't happen. So there's a plus side to the tech in that respect, but there's more negatives than anything. It is isolating. And we're already, as a country, we're already, like, in my personal opinion, we are so focused on ourselves and get this and have this and capitalism and all that, and I don't care, I'm going to stomp on you, and I don't care, I'm going to say what I need to say to you with my keyboard courage. We're already like that. Do we want to bring up a whole nother generation like that? I don't think so. So it's important for us to be back in school. It really is. There's I would say 5% of the kids do way better all around being online, but that's a very small percentage.
Boy, that fascinating tension and community as well.
Yes.
Like, school is a powerful socializing force, but we all can probably relate to the pains that also accompany that.
Yes.
It's just a fascinating world. How do you keep going, Trish? That's what I want to know. Here we are, year 25.
My work is never boring. I always have a lot of ideas. There are days I felt like quitting. I've had days where I'm just like, okay, I'm done. I'm gonna do something else, right? But there's a fight that's still there that I want to get some traction on, and that's around how we create environments in school and stop focusing on the latest math tool, the latest reading tool, and all that, and think about, it doesn't matter what your curriculum and tools are. If you don't have an environment where kids and teachers feel like they can be their best and learn and feel safe and feel like they can try things, take academic risks and all of that, it doesn't matter, right? Because at this point, you're really just schooling kids. You're not educating kids. And we really need to get to a place where school is a place I want to go every day instead of a place I have to go because the law says I have to. And it's going to be a long time before we get there, but I want to go as far as I can in that and really bring up this next generation of educators to stay the course in that direction.
Mm-hmm. And I think maybe a powerful force motivating you is the generational change that you experienced from your mom's generation to yours, and wanting to make sure you continue to see that kind of progress in the realm of generational change.
Yeah.
And Trish, one thing we didn't talk about is that you have depended on donors to accomplish a lot of this. And what if people want to learn more about TAF? What would you recommend they do?
So we depend, well, as a nonprofit, that's our main source of income. And we want to continue to grow throughout the state, eventually throughout the nation, you never know. But if people want to learn about our work, you can go to our website. The URL is above my head here. We have a lot of information there about what we do. And then also happy to meet with anybody who wants to learn more. We have a YouTube channel that has all of our documentaries and videos on there. I would spend some time there. It's Tech Access is the name of the YouTube channel. And then just really, we'll reach out and talk to folks about the work. The more people who know about it, even if you're not giving, the more you know about it and you tell other people about it, the faster we can achieve our mission.
And I should have noted that a local tech publication, GeekWire, had given Trish the Giving Back Award a few years ago. So again, part of that generational legacy. And I thank you for all your time, Trish. We didn't even talk about the culture of philanthropy. That's like a whole nother show.
Oh my gosh, that is just, yeah, that's a whole nother beast, because that's changing now. It's starting to change, and people are starting to see that it's important to give to organizations that are actually doing the work for the people who are like them, versus giving to organizations that are led by people that are furthest away from the actual work itself. And so that's starting to change, and people are starting to get the message that we as people of color are pretty smart. We know what we're doing. Right. And so what we need is for people to invest in us so we can help our own communities.
Right. Because, a study found that amongst a broad survey of nonprofit groups, those serving children of color or people of color were so often headed by white leaders. And and TAF's different that way. If you go on the website and look at the portfolio of the staff, for instance, you're going to see a lot of women and a lot of people of color. And Trish, thank you so much for your time. I could talk to you for a long time. I just want to say that put in a plug for our Ahead of the Curve project. So you can read the full biography of Trish and of some other amazing Washington women. We called it Ahead of the Curve because it was our project was hooked to the centennial of women's voting rights in the U.S., the 19th Amendment. But Washington was a leader. We were allowing women to vote, or giving them the right to vote 10 years before the nation did as a whole. So if you go to www.sos.wa.gov/legacy. I know that's a lot. You just scroll down for the Ahead of the Curve project, click on that. You will be able to access all this. The full book is available free online. You can purchase a hardcover or a bound version of if you will, of the print. That has to cost money, but the free electronic version resides there as well. So thank you for allowing me that plug.
Yeah.
Trish, great to see you. Keep up.
Great to see you too.
Keep up the great work and be well. And
all right.
I hope we'll talk again soon.
Oh, we will. This is the work, man. It's not going to go away.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.